everyone. For those who don't know me, I'm Kat. I'm a wife, a homeschool mom, and an avid reader. For everyone else, welcome back. It is April, and I honestly had a great March reading, and am excited to share with you some of my thoughts on what I read. Although I'm going to do this a little bit differently than how I normally would do a wrap up for the month. So, the way this is going to look is I'm going to tell you what I read title by title or series by series, depending, and then give some examples of some books that reminded me of these books as I was reading, or some jumping off points. So if you've read the title that I already have, this might lead you somewhere else to look. Or if you've read some of the ones that I think would be that are similar, it might lead you to want to check out these ones. That being said, let's jump in to what I read. So first I read Silence in the Shadows by Darcy Coates. This is the final book in the Black Winter series and is a dystopian series. In this one, we're following a male and a female main character as they're dealing with the fallouts of a virus that is sweeping through their world. One title that really reminded me and had a lot of these same feels was Emily St. John Mandel's Station 11. In Station 11, again, we start with the virus that is causing all the problems that leads to the dystopian, and then it jumps forward years in the future, and we kind of start to see civilization pulling its way out. And that's why I picked that one. But a couple other dystopians that I think could fit into this vibe are Octavia Butler's Parable of the Sower and Parable of the Talents. I have only read Parable of the Sower, and it was many years ago. I don't remember a lot about it other than it was that dystopian, and some of the vibes in Silence in the Black Winter series reminded me of Parable of the Sower. And then Lewis Lowry's The Giver. This was my first introduction into the dystopian world in middle school. And it's just a book that's really stuck with me. And I think that if you like any of the three, you might like Black Winter. Or if you like the Black Winter series, you might enjoy any of those three. The next books that I read are all part of the Vicious Lost Boys series by Nikki St. Crow. And in that, I reread The Never King and The Dark One, along with reading the next two, Their Vicious Darling and The Fey Princes. Overall, when I originally read The Never King and The Dark One, I probably would have recommended this a little more than I would now. Honestly, I don't think that I would recommend this series very highly unless you like this type of stories and erotica that really just has these shocking sexual acts for that shock factor. But overall, my taste over the years has changed, and while I don't hate these, I don't know that I would have picked them up today if I had not already started this series in 2022. just to show you how much my taste has changed in 4 years. So overall, honestly, these books kind of gave me icky feelings, similar to the weird feelings that I got when I was reading Haunting Adeline. So maybe if you enjoyed Haunting Adeline, you might give this a try. I would think also Den of Vipers might also fall into that if you are looking specifically for books that have those shocking sexual acts. Um, as far as plot goes, it was an interesting take on Peter Pan, but honestly, I feel that there are many other books and Peter Pan retellings that retell this story in different and interesting ways a whole lot better. But not horrible, just not in my taste anymore. So, the next book that I read in March is For You and Only You, which is the fourth book in the Joe Goldberg You series by Caroline Kepnes. This one we have You is the first one, then Hidden Bodies, and then You Loved Me. Overall, I had a great time in this series. Although, by the time I got to For You and Only You, I felt that we were just rewashing, rehashing things that had happened in these books, along with Joe Goldberg still doing the same exact things. And so for that reason, I honestly would say I'm probably am not going to recommend For You and Only You. If you want something kind of playing in the background, I would say put on the Netflix series and listen/watch it while you're folding laundry or knitting or crocheting or doing some sort of activity that only needs part of your attention that you can still partially follow along with what's going on in the TV show. Um, like I said, the series and the writing are well done, um, or the premise and the writing are well done. But by the time you get to the fourth book, it really is just a rinse and repeat of the same actions and events. One neat thing that is seen in the fourth book is that we get mention of the COVID pandemic. And so, seeing that it's happening in the real world and around us, was a little unsettling. But overall, by the time I read the fourth one, I was definitely over Joe and his horrible, horrible actions. All right, let's take a break from the books that I was not enjoying as much and go to my next book of the month. I think had it continued in this I was over it type books, I would have not had as good of a reading month. But the next one that I read was Under the Smoke-Strewn Sky. This is the final book in the Up and Under series. I actually only have the second book because I've read all of the others on Kindle or from the library. The first one I read from the library. I really, really enjoyed this series. It is a portal fantasy, and you have two kids who go over a garden wall and end up in the Up and Under. And in this, throughout the four books, you're following along as they're journeying, trying to get back home. And this kind of portal fantasy I really, really enjoy. And that as I was reading it, I was reminded of so many portal fantasies that I've enjoyed over the years. Two that I'm going to mention. First one being Alex Harrow's The 10,000 Doors of January. This one was so good. And in this, we have our main character, January, who goes through certain doors and it transports her to another world. And very similar kind of themes of that trying to figure out life and trying to get back. The other book that I kept thinking of off of my shelves that was a portal fantasy is The Lost Story by Meg Schaefer. In this one, we have two teenage boys who go into the woods as a trip with their class, and they disappear for 6 months. When they reappear, they kind of split ways and no longer see each other for a long time, 15 years. And then after those 15 years, they end up coming back together to find someone that they had actually seen in this other world. This one was a lot of emotional feelings with it. But overall, I had a great time with it. And then, of course, we all know as kids growing up, that really fits alongside the Up and Under series is the Chronicles of Narnia, specifically The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, in which the four Pevensies go through the wardrobe. But I will talk more about that one in a few minutes. I will say with the portal fantasies, Seanan McGuire's Every Heart a Doorway, yes, Every Heart a Doorway would also be a great portal fantasy to try after reading the Up and Under, or if you liked Every Heart a Doorway, to go try out the Up and Under, because they are by the same author. All right, so that brings me to the next series that I read. And in this one, I actually went back and reread all four of them, similar to how I did the Vicious Lost Boys. And that is The Green Ember by S.D. Smith. This one I loved. There was so much in it that as I was reading, I kept, this reminds me of this, this reminds me of this. And I could pull out a lot of strong Christian themes in it. And then when I got to the end of the book, there's the author's note, or the end of the fourth book, you have the author's note in which you find out that that was not an accident. So if you're looking for books with Christian themes, now I'm saying Christian themes, not allegory, for a reason, because I don't feel that The Green Ember is truly an allegory, nor are all the books on my list that I would say if you enjoy The Green Ember to try. The first one, of course, is an allegory, and that's The Chronicles of Narnia by C.S. Lewis. This series, I always loved it. YA or middle grade, great story to read, and gives you not only the biblical themes, but also biblical theology to go along with it, as many of the characters in the book are allegories of biblical characters. The magician and the nephew, or the magician's nephew, is an allegory of to the creation, the Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which I mentioned a few minutes ago, is allegory of Jesus Christ and how he came to save us from our sins. So very great allegory, very great middle grade with lots of Christian themes woven in because of the allegory. The next title, and this is why I stressed that it was Christian themes and not allegory, because this author specifically said that his is not an allegory or a Christian story, but it still has those Christian themes, and that is J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. This is very much that good versus evil, and a lot of strong biblical themes that you see in The Green Ember of courage and facing adversities and different things like that, that really stand out in here. That also stood out in The Green Ember, and I had a great time with it. I would say one I haven't read personally but my daughter enjoyed is Brian Davis's Dragons in Our Midst. That one also has a lot of Christian themes in it and is written by a Christian author. And so all of these, I would say, if you like one, you could easily give a try into some of these others. I will say the Chronicles of Narnia, along with Dragons in Our Midst and The Green Ember, are all middle grade, whereas I would say The Lord of the Rings is going to be more adult than the others. But I think, as C.S. Lewis says, good children's books can be enjoyed by all ages. Up next, during the month, I read Sloane St. James's of Ink and Alchemy. This one, it takes place mostly in a tattoo shop, so tattoos are prominent, but we also have a little bit of stalking going on in this one. And as I was trying to pick out books to go along with things that were going on in the other books, to give suggestions for other books, the only thing that kept coming to mind was Lights Out by Navissa Allen. This one I have just recently read. I read this in February. Had a great time with it. It does have that stalking in it, and the main character, Josh, his tattoos do play a prominent role in the book. Truthfully, though, I don't read a lot of books about tattoo artists, so I couldn't really recommend very many or any there. But of Ink and Alchemy, I'll give a little bit more thorough of a what I thought about it in my probably smut unboxing that's coming out soon. All right, so the next book I read was The Tenant of Wildfell Hall by Anne Bronte. I really, really enjoyed this one. There was so much in it, but some of the themes in it, I think I might have enjoyed the way I did just because of things in my personal life, and where I'm at right now. But the writing is fantastic. And I really, really enjoyed the time I had with it. Honestly, as I was trying to think of titles that might go along with it, I really was struggling because this is not my normal, like, if I go into a store, I'm not normally going to the classics. This is not one that I would have picked up myself if a trusted friend had not really highly recommended it to me, and told me, like, that I had to read it. And it was one of her favorites. So I don't really have recommendations with this one, although it is Anne Bronte. So I would say anything by Charlotte or Emily. Why I couldn't remember that, I don't know. But anything by Charlotte, Emily, or Anne Bronte, I think would give you very much the same feels. I know my daughter read Jane Eyre. I read part of Jane Eyre, or I've read all of Jane Eyre, but my brain keeps stopping at only half of it, like remembering only the first half. I don't know why. So I would say very similar writing styles, but very different. With Jane Eyre, it's following a young girl looking to get married, whereas Anne is following an adult who's already married and getting out of a bad situation. So, kind of depending on where you're looking, where you are in life, might lead you to enjoy one more than the other, but I don't know. All right, so up next, I read Caught Up by Navessa Allen. Kind of going in that same theme that I was trying really hard to stick with all month, was reading books that I had the series going. And I had read in February, read Lights Out, then March, read Caught Up in preparation for Game On coming out, which it now has. So I'm excited to go on ahead and wrap up this series. But the Into Darkness, this one is following Nico, who is Allie's cousin from Lights Out. But so we have the so it's following Junior or Nico and Lauren. And in this one, just a lot of different things are going on in here. If you enjoyed Lights Out or Caught Up and are looking for more, I would recommend Brianne Weaver's The Ruinous series, Ruinous Love series. And this one, the first one's Butcher and Blackbird, Scythe and Songbird, Leather and Lark, I think are the three that are out. And the reason I recommend those is because that's kind of what brought me to this series were the covers. The covers are just very bright. The blue, the orange, and then Game On will be green. Just the bold, bright colors on the black background caught my eye and led me to it. And then as I read them, you have a lot of that morally gray, let's play off of each other type feel that you get throughout the Ruinous Love series. Up next, I read Everybody Wants to Rule the World Except Me by Django Wexler. I had a great time with this one. I love the D&D, the Deadpool-esque vibes that I got from it. But I will give a warning that this is one I would not recommend to everybody. Just as with Deadpool, where there's a lot of language, there also is a lot of language in the Dark Lord Davi duology. Not only that, but there's some intimate scenes. It kind of dances with it and then fades to black. So I think I gave it 2 chili peppers. And not 3, because it wasn't really open door, but there was a lot going on in there. So I would say if you enjoy Deadpool, if you enjoy D&D type books, if you enjoyed, what is that one? Legends and Lattes. That one's by Travis Baldry. I would say if you like that kind of vibe, that this one probably would fit right in there. Another book that I keep thinking of that might fit into this would be T is for Treason, but I haven't read that one yet. I started it at a bad time and had to put it aside for a time because I just couldn't focus on a fantasy world while life was going on at that time. So, Everybody Wants to Rule the World, definitely a maybe book because of the language and the almost open door, closed door scenes. All right, that leads me to the last book of the month that I read, which was How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days by Jessie Sylvia. I really enjoyed this book, but I was led to this book. This book caught my attention because of the play on How to Lose a Guy in 10 Days, or that's where my mind went when I saw the title. And because of that, I had a little bit of a hard time really getting into the book because my mind just kept going to, okay, when's she going to try to lose him? And that's, while there is that theme of trying to get rid of each other, it doesn't really last very long. I wouldn't even say that this is a enemies to lovers as it's kind of sold as. Yes, they're enemies, but they're more enemies in the way that Romeo and Juliet were enemies. They were enemies because their families were enemies. And you kind of get that with this one. The halflings and the goblins are enemies as races, but not really enemies. Our main characters, Pansy and Rin, aren't really enemies overall against each other than they're trying to get the same house. I would say it's more of a strangers to lovers type sense, but overall I had a fun time with this one. And the overall feel I got with this one reminded me of Love Letters and Thirst Tonics. And that one is by Haley Blackwood. So if you enjoy that kind of banter between characters, kind of the love story that they aren't necessarily trying to bash each other on the head, but they have to overcome prejudices of their past is where I'm going with that. So I would say if you enjoy that type of book, that would be a good one to give a shot. So How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days. All right, so here's the time we are all looking forward to, and that is the stats. Overall, I read 16 books. I read 5,324 pages. My first, middle, and last are a little bit off because of when I started and ended books. It says that my first was Fake It Till You Made It, which I actually had as my last book in February. So if you want to hear about that one, I would say look back at my last wrap up. Whereas my real first book in March was Silence in the Shadows. And then it says that Everyone Wants to Rule the World Except Me was my last book. Although I'm including How to Lose a Goblin in 10 Days, even though I finished it on the 3rd of April. So overall, I think I had a really good reading month. Looking at my chart, I read 11 fantasies. 8 of the books had romance, 5 middle grade, 4 erotica, and 1 contemporary. So I think looking at that, the contemporary would have been For You and Only You, or maybe Caught Up. I would say that both of those were contemporary. The erotica was all 4 of the Nikki St. Crow's books, and then the middle grade being The Green Ember and Under the Smoke-Strewn Sky. Then I'd say the fantasy and romance really overlapped in those. Yeah, so that's where we are at, and I hope that your reading month was just as wonderful, whether you read 1 book, whether you read 30 books, or any number in between or above, or even below if you didn't read any books. I hope that your March was wonderful, and I can't wait to show you what April's bringing.